Have you ever noticed how grief arrives not once, but in waves? How you can feel steady for hours or even days, and then something small, a scent or a phrase or the angle of afternoon light, pulls the ground out from under you again. Loss does this. It doesn't announce itself and then politely leave. It moves through you the way weather moves through a valley, sometimes distant, sometimes so close you can't see anything else. And in those moments when it's close, when the sorrow is right there in your chest or your throat, you might find yourself asking, what am I supposed to do with this? How much of this feeling is too much? When does it end? Buddhism doesn't answer that question the way we might hope. It doesn't offer a timeline or a set of steps that lead to a place where the loss no longer matters. But it does offer something else. It offers a way to be with what's here, not to fix it, not to rush past it, but to hold it the way you might hold water in your cupped hands, gently, knowing it will eventually slip through, but not needing to clench against that fact. Take a breath now, if you'd like. Just one full breath, in and out. Notice where the air moves. Notice what it feels like to be here, listening, in this moment that is only this moment. Grief often makes us feel like we're doing something wrong. The mind tells us we should be over it by now, or that we're feeling too much or not enough, or in the wrong way. There's a voice that says, this isn't normal, this isn't healthy, you need to move on. And beneath that voice is something even quieter, a fear that if we really let ourselves feel the loss, we'll be swallowed by it, that we won't come back. Buddhism begins with a different premise. It begins by saying suffering is here, not as a mistake, not as a punishment, but as part of the texture of living. The first noble truth isn't pessimistic, it's just honest. When we love, when we attach, when we build our lives around people and moments, and the feeling of home, we also step into the reality that all of this will change. And when it does, there is sorrow. The question isn't whether we'll experience loss. The question is how we meet it. Think of sorrow like rain falling on a hillside. If the ground is hard, if we've clenched against the possibility of pain, the water has nowhere to go. It pools, it floods, it carves deep channels that feel impossible to cross. But if the ground is soft, if there's space for the water to soak in, it moves through. It nourishes. It doesn't disappear, but it doesn't destroy either. Tenderness is that softness. And tenderness, in the Buddhist sense, doesn't mean being fragile. It means allowing the heart to be touched, to feel what it feels without the second layer of resistance. The voice that says this shouldn't be happening. You can notice this right now, in your body. Is there tightness anywhere? In your jaw, your shoulders, your belly? You don't need to change it. Just notice. See if you can bring a little curiosity to that tension. What is it guarding? What would it feel like to soften, even slightly, even just for the length of one breath? When we grieve, we're not just feeling the absence of what we've lost. We're also feeling the presence of love. Grief is love with nowhere to go, someone once said, and that's true. The ache we carry is evidence of connection. It's the shape that care takes when the object of that care is no longer here in the way it was. Buddhism invites us to turn toward that ache, not away from it. To sit with it the way you'd sit beside a river. You don't jump in and let it carry you under, but you also don't pretend it isn't there. You listen to it. You let it move. You notice that even as it flows, you remain on the bank, breathing, present, aware. This isn't easy. It asks something of us that feels counterintuitive. The instinct is to close, to protect, to distract. And sometimes we need those things. Sometimes we need to look away. But there are also moments when we can practice staying, when we can let the sorrow be exactly as large as it is, without making it larger, and without needing it to be smaller. What would it be like to meet your grief that way? Not as a problem to solve, not as a sign that something is broken in you, but as a guest who has arrived, who will stay as long as it needs to, and who carries with it something true about your life. Let's sit with that question for a while. When loss arrives, the body does not receive a warning. It comes like a tree struck by lightning. The tree does not choose the moment. It does not prepare. One instant the branches hold their shape against the sky, and the next, something fundamental has shifted. The roots remain, the earth still holds. But the tree is forever altered. It stands differently now. It will grow differently. And this is not a metaphor about strength or recovery. It is simply what happens when something beloved is taken. The Buddha spoke of this directly. He did not soften it with promises. He said, "All that is dear to me, and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them." This is not pessimism. It is not darkness. It is the simple fact of living in a world where everything that arises will pass. Everything that comes together will come apart. A person, a season, a way of being with another, the texture of a voice, the weight of a hand in yours. Most of us do not live as if we believe this. We move through days as though the people we love, the moments we cherish, the versions of ourselves we have grown accustomed to, will hold their shape indefinitely. We do not consciously think this, but the body believes it. The heart believes it. And when loss comes, the body does not know how to stand. The shock of grief is not only emotional, it is physical. The ground beneath you becomes uncertain. You reach for something that is no longer there. Your hand closes on air. Your breath becomes shallow. Your chest tightens. The world continues around you, but you are no longer moving at the same speed. Time feels wrong. Your own body feels like a stranger's. This is the moment when many of us begin to resist. We push against the reality of what has happened. We tell ourselves it should not have occurred. We bargain with the impossible. We search for the moment we could have changed things. We cling to memories as though holding them tightly enough could bring back what was lost. And all of this resistance is natural. It is the body's way of saying, "This hurts. I do not want this. This should not be." But resistance to what has already happened does not change what has happened. It only adds another layer of suffering on top of the grief itself. The grief is real. The loss is real. But the rejection of the loss, the insistence that things should be different than they are, creates a kind of internal collision. You are pushing against a wall that does not move, and the effort exhausts you. There is another way to stand with this, not to make it better, not to transcend it or rise above it, but to stop pushing against it, to let the grief be what it is, to let the loss be what it is, to stop trying to rearrange what has already been broken. A tree struck by lightning does not resist its own burning. It does not argue with the fire. The wood chars, the bark splits, the shape changes, and yet the tree remains rooted. The roots do not flee, they go deeper. They search for water in the changed soil. They hold the tree upright, even as the tree has become something new. This is what tenderness looks like in the face of loss, not the denial of pain, not the pretense that everything will be fine, but the willingness to remain present with what is actually here, to let your own body be broken and still be held, to acknowledge that yes, this is the nature of things. Everything that is dear to you will change. Everyone you love will be separated from you, either by their death or by your own. This is not a failure of love. This is the condition of love in a world where nothing stays still. When you are in the depths of grief, this understanding may feel cold. It may feel like philosophy when what you need is comfort. But there is a quiet comfort in stopping the resistance. There is relief in finally admitting what you already know to be true. Right now, if you are carrying grief, or if you are simply sitting with the knowledge that loss will come, you might notice what is happening in your chest. There is a tightness there, perhaps, a heaviness, a place where the breath does not move as freely as it does elsewhere in your body. You do not need to change this. You do not need to fix it or make it go away. But you might place one hand on your chest. Rest it there gently. Feel the bone beneath your palm. Feel the movement underneath. Breathe in and notice how your hand rises. Breathe out and feel it fall. Breathe in again, just 3 breaths. 3 simple movements of your own living body. This body that is still here, still breathing, still capable of feeling, even when what it feels is sorrow. When grief arrives, we often feel 2 things at once. There is the rawness itself, the hollow ache, the moments when a memory surfaces and the body goes quiet. And then there is something else underneath. A kind of urgency, a sense that this should not be lasting this long, that we should be moving past it by now. This second thing is quieter than the first, but it is no less real. It is a subtle resistance to the grief itself, not resistance to the person we have lost. We would never say that. But a resistance to the fact that we are still grieving, that the heaviness has not lifted, that we will turn a corner and suddenly remember they are gone, and the remembering will hurt again. The teaching that comes down through early Buddhism is simple and direct. It does not dress itself up. Pain is inevitable. It is part of being alive. But suffering, the additional layer, the struggle against what is happening, suffering is optional. It arises from aversion, from the push against reality as it actually is right now. This is not a blame. It is not saying that your resistance is wrong or that you should have handled grief better. Aversion is not a character flaw. It is a reflex. When something hurts, the mind naturally wants it to stop. The body wants to pull away. This is not a mistake. It is how we are built. But notice what happens when you try to hold a stone underwater. You place your hands beneath it and push. The stone is heavy, yes, but the effort, the sustained pushing, the tension in your arms and shoulders, the way your whole body braces against the weight, this effort creates something beyond the weight itself. It creates strain, it creates exhaustion. The stone would sink on its own. The weight is already there. But the pushing, the resistance to the stone's presence, this is where the real suffering lives. Grief is like this. The loss is real. The absence is real. These are the stone. They have weight. But when we resist the fact that we are grieving, when we push against the sorrow that is already here, we add something extra. We add the effort of denial, the tension of, this should not still be happening, the exhaustion of holding ourselves together against what we are actually feeling. Many people, when they are grieving, describe a kind of double pain. First, there is the loss itself. And then there is the feeling that they are failing at grief, that they should be stronger by now, that they should be able to move through their day without suddenly finding themselves unable to speak, that other people have managed this better, more quickly, more gracefully. This second pain is almost entirely made of aversion. It is the resistance to the fact that grief is still present. The mind wants a timeline. It wants to know when this will be over. It wants to believe that if you do the right things, If you process enough, if you talk about it enough, if you move forward in the right way, then eventually you will reach a point where you are no longer grieving. And then you will be okay. But grief does not work this way. It is not a problem to be solved. It is a response to love. It is what happens when someone has mattered to us, and they are no longer here. The sorrow is not separate from the love. It is inseparable from it. To wish for the grief to disappear completely is, in a subtle way, to wish that the person had mattered less. This does not mean the grief will not change. It will. Over time, the acute rawness often softens. The moments when sorrow rises up may become less frequent. But this change happens not through resistance to the grief, but through a gradual, gentle acceptance of it, through stopping the effort to push it away. When you stop holding the stone underwater, it does not disappear, but you stop exhausting yourself. You stop creating the additional suffering that comes from the struggle. The stone still has weight, but you are no longer fighting against it. The practice, then, is not to do anything special with your grief. It is to notice, in one moment today, where you are resisting what is already here. It might be small. It might be a tightness in your chest when a memory comes. It might be the thought that arises, "I should be over this by now." It might be the way you catch yourself trying to stay busy, trying to outrun the feeling. Just notice it, not to fix it, not to judge yourself for it, simply to see the difference between the pain itself and the resistance to the pain. To feel, for a moment, what it is like when you are not pushing quite so hard. When you allow the sorrow to be present without making it mean something about you or your progress. This noticing, this simple seeing of the difference, is where the softening begins. There is a kind of grief that arrives before language. You might notice it first as a heaviness in your chest, a tightness in your throat, a dull weight settling low in your belly. It is not yet a story. It is not yet a name. It is sensation, raw, present, and often bewildering, because we do not know what to do with it. We are taught to move through grief quickly, to process it, to find meaning in it, to transform it into something useful or noble. But before any of that can happen, there is simply the body holding something it cannot yet name. And in that unnamed space, many of us become stuck, not because we are weak, but because we have learned to mistrust what we cannot immediately understand or fix. The Zen tradition teaches something quieter. The way out is through. Not around, not over, not by thinking our way to the other side, but through. This means turning toward the very sensation we most want to escape. It means sitting down with the heaviness and letting it be heavy. It means placing your attention on the part of you that hurts most, without trying to change it, without waiting for it to dissolve, without insisting that you understand what it means. This goes against almost everything we have been told about healing. We imagine healing as a process of lightening, of rising above, of transcending the pain. But there is another possibility. What if the way through grief is not to lift it away, but to let it settle fully? What if the body knows something the mind does not? Think of a river carrying silt. When the current moves swiftly, the heavy particles stay suspended, churned in the water. But when the river slows, when it finds a wide, quiet place, the silt begins to sink. It does not disappear, it settles. It finds its resting place on the riverbed. The river does not fight this. The river does not try to keep the silt floating. It simply allows the weight to do what weight does. And in that allowing, the water above becomes clearer. Your grief is like that silt. It is not meant to stay suspended in your chest forever. caught in a current of avoidance and distraction. But it also will not simply vanish if you ignore it. It needs somewhere to settle. It needs your attention, your stillness, your permission to be exactly as heavy as it is. Many people describe the moment they stop fighting their grief as a kind of collapse. They sit down. They stop trying to be okay. And in that stopping, something shifts. Not because the sadness goes away, but because they are no longer using all their energy to hold it at bay. The body relaxes into the weight it was already carrying. The silt begins to settle. This is not resignation. It is not giving up. It is a kind of consent. You are saying to your own body, to your own heart, I see you. I will not run from this. I will sit with you in this darkness, and we will wait together. When you place your hand on your own chest and feel the heaviness there, when you breathe into the tightness in your throat without trying to loosen it, when you acknowledge the dull ache in your belly without demanding that it leave, in that moment, you are being tender with yourself in the deepest way. There is a particular kind of tenderness that emerges only when you stop trying to escape. It is not the tenderness of comfort or reassurance. It is the tenderness of simply being present to what is real. You are not abandoning yourself to the pain. You are accompanying it. The practice is simple, though not easy. Find a quiet place. Sit in a way that feels stable. Close your eyes if that feels right. And then, without forcing anything, bring your attention to the heaviest part of your body right now. Not the part that should hurt, the part that actually does. It might be your chest, it might be your belly, it might be your throat or your shoulders. You will know it when you find it. Place your attention there like you would place your hand on the shoulder of someone you love who is suffering. Not to fix them, not to change what they are experiencing, simply to acknowledge I am here. This is real. You are not alone in this. Do not try to understand what the heaviness means. Do not try to name it or analyze it. If words come, let them pass like clouds. Keep returning to the sensation itself, the weight, the texture, the temperature, the way it moves or does not move when you breathe. You may notice that the sensation changes. It may become sharper or softer. It may move. It may seem to pulse. You may find that tears come, or sounds, or nothing at all. Whatever arises, you are not doing it wrong. Your body is doing exactly what it needs to do. The silt is settling. The river is finding its stillness. Stay here as long as it feels true to stay. There is no goal. There is no moment at which you will have done this correctly. There is only this: your breath, your body, and the willingness to be present to what is actually here. There is a particular fear that lives in grief. It is not the fear of the loss itself that has already happened. It is the fear of what might happen next. If I stop hurting, if I let this weight soften, if I learn to live without the daily ache, will I be letting go of them? Will they disappear from me entirely? This fear is so quiet and so deep that many people never speak it aloud. They carry it like a stone in the chest, believing that their sorrow is the last place where the person they lost still lives. To release the pain feels like a betrayal. It feels like forgetting. It feels like a second death. Buddhism does not ask you to release this fear through willpower or through shame. It asks you to look at it directly, to see what is actually happening when we cling to grief, as if it were the only proof that love existed. Imagine a bell that has been struck. The sound rises, fills the space, becomes everything we hear. Then gradually, the sound fades. It becomes quieter and quieter until we can no longer hear it. But the bell itself remains. The metal still holds something of what happened. The vibration has moved into the structure of the bell itself, into the air, into the space around it. The sound is not gone, it has changed form. This is what the teachings point toward. Love does not end when form dissolves. What was shared continues in how we meet the world. When we lose someone, we lose their physical presence. We lose the sound of their voice, the particular way they moved, the conversations we might have had. This loss is real, and it deserves to be felt completely. But there is something else that does not dissolve. There is what they gave us. The ways they shaped how we see, the kindnesses they showed us, the words they spoke that we still hear in difficult moments, the example they set, whether through what they did or what they taught us not to do. These things are not memories in the sense of pictures we hold in our mind. They are living currents in us. They are how we respond to others now. They are the choices we make. They are the particular way we listen to someone who is suffering, or the way we notice beauty, or the way we refuse to give up on something that matters. These are not separate from the person who loved us. They are the person continuing. But here is what happens when we grip our grief too tightly. We try to keep the sound of the bell alive by refusing to let it change. We stay close to the pain because the pain feels like the last place where they live. And in doing this, we do not let what they gave us actually move into the world. We do not let it become alive in how we touch other people's lives. The fear makes sense. It is born from love. But it is based on a misunderstanding about how love works. When you learn something true from someone, when they show you kindness, and you understand what kindness is because of them, that becomes part of how you are. It is not a memory you are holding. It is a way of being that they created in you. And every time you offer that kindness to another person, the person who taught you is there, not as a ghost, not as a thought, but as the living current that moves through your hands, your words, your presence. This is not something you have to believe. You can test it directly. Think of someone you lost, someone whose absence still shapes your days. Now think of one small kindness they showed you. Not the grand moments necessarily. Perhaps it was the way they listened when you were afraid. Perhaps it was how they made tea and brought it to you without asking. Perhaps it was the way they laughed, or the way they kept trying even when things were difficult. Perhaps it was simply that they saw you. Now notice something. That kindness still exists in you. You know what it feels like to be truly listened to because they listened to you. You know what it feels like to be cared for in small, ordinary ways because they cared for you that way. You know what it looks like to keep going because you watched them do it. The bell has been struck. The sound has changed, but it is still sounding through you every time you offer what they gave you to someone else. This is how we hold sorrow with tenderness, not by refusing to let it change, but by understanding that the change is not a loss, it is a transformation. The pain will soften, the sharp edges will wear smooth, the weight will become lighter. And in that lightening, the love does not disappear. It becomes what it always was underneath the form, a way of moving through the world, a way of seeing, a way of touching another person's life with care. When you are ready, you might notice one small thing the person you lost taught you about kindness. Not to hold it as a memory, but to let it move through you. And then, when you meet someone today, someone who is struggling or afraid or simply present, you might offer them that kindness, not as a way of honoring the dead, but as the natural continuation of a love that never actually ended. It only changed shape. When grief arrives, it often carries a strange cruelty with it. The pain of loss feels permanent in a way that nothing else does. A person dies, a relationship ends, a life we counted on dissolves, and in that moment, the permanence of the absence feels absolute. It feels like this is how things will be forever. The world has changed shape, and it will never change back. This belief that our sorrow is fixed, that we are now permanently broken, sits beneath the grief like bedrock. But there is something the Buddha kept returning to, something he noticed so clearly, that it became the foundation of his entire teaching. He saw that nothing, actually nothing, remains the same from one moment to the next. Not objects, not people, not even our own thoughts and feelings. Everything that arises also passes away, and he did not present this as a punishment or a cosmic joke. He presented it as the actual nature of how things are. When we are grieving, this teaching can feel like the cruelest thing anyone could say. It can sound like someone telling us our pain doesn't matter because it will change. That our loss is somehow less real because nothing lasts. But that misses what the Buddha was actually pointing to. He was not saying grief should be easy or that we should rush past it. He was saying something more tender than that. He was saying that the very nature of impermanence, the fact that nothing stays fixed, is also what allows grief to move. Think of how weather moves across a valley. A storm rolls in, and while it is there, the entire landscape is defined by rain and wind and darkness. The storm feels total. It feels like the only thing that exists, but the storm does not stay. The clouds shift, the rain stops, and then gradually the valley opens again. The clearing is not because the storm was weak, or because we decided to ignore it. The clearing happens because that is what impermanence does. It moves things through. The same is true of sorrow. When grief is present, it is genuinely present. It fills the space, it colors everything. But grief, like the storm, is not a permanent resident of your being. It is a movement through you, not a fixed state that you have become. This is not a reason to dismiss what you feel. It is a reason to understand that your pain has a different nature than you might think when you are in the middle of it. There is a particular kind of suffering that comes from believing our grief should be permanent, that moving through it would be a betrayal. We hold on to the pain sometimes because we think letting it change would mean we are forgetting the person or diminishing what they meant to us. We confuse the intensity of our sorrow with the depth of our love. But these are not the same thing. Love does not require that we suffer forever. In fact, the Buddha taught that clinging to pain, trying to make it stay, is a form of suffering on top of suffering. We grieve the loss, and then we grieve the fact that we are grieving. When you begin to notice that grief itself is not a solid, unchanging thing, something shifts. You might notice that some moments are heavier than others. Some hours the loss feels acute, and other hours it sits further back. Some days you can remember the person with something close to warmth, and other days the absence is sharp again. These are not signs that you are doing grief wrong, or that you are not grieving enough. These are signs that you are experiencing what is actually happening, a process, not a state. A weather pattern moving through, not a permanent climate. The weather metaphor holds another truth as well. Just as no storm lasts forever, no clear sky is permanent either. The valley will see rain again. This is not pessimism. It is simply how weather works, and in the same way, grief may return. You may have a season where the loss feels distant, and then something will remind you, and the sorrow will be present again. This does not mean you were healed and then broke. It means you are alive, and you loved something that is no longer here. The grief moves in cycles, like weather moves in seasons. To begin to sense this directly, rather than just thinking about it, there is something simple you can do. Today, choose one small thing to notice. It might be a plant on your windowsill, the light in a room, your own face in a mirror, a piece of clothing you are wearing. Look at it or feel it in the morning, and then return to it later in the day. Notice what has already changed. The plant may have turned slightly toward the light. The light itself has moved across the room. Your face may look different, perhaps more rested or more tired. The clothing may have wrinkled or shifted. These are tiny changes, almost invisible, but they are real. Nothing stayed exactly as it was. This is not a morbid exercise. It is an invitation to sense, directly and gently, that change is not something that happens only to big things like loss. Change is the texture of existence itself. And if change is always happening, then the grief you carry right now is also changing. Not because you are trying to make it change. Not because you are forcing yourself to move on, but because that is what impermanence does. It moves things through. When grief arrives, it comes with a particular weight. Not the weight of something added, but the weight of something absent. And in that absence, many of us find ourselves disappearing too. The days blur. We forget to eat, or we eat without tasting. We move through hours without quite inhabiting them. It is as though the loss has taken not just the person or the thing we loved, but also our own presence in the world that remains. This forgetting is understandable. Grief is not a small thing. It is a reorganization of the heart. When someone dies, or when we lose something we held close, the world suddenly has a hole in it. And we, having loved that person or that thing, have a hole in us. The mind does what it can. It contracts. It turns inward. It holds the loss so tightly that there is no room left for anything else. Not for breath. Not for the simple fact that we are still here, still alive, still part of a world that continues to turn. But here is what the early teachings point to. Again and again, the path does not stop when the heart breaks. The path continues, not in spite of the sorrow, but alongside it. One step, then another. One breath, then another. The soil does not stop asking to be turned, because the frost has killed the tender plants. The gardener grieves what is lost. The gardener feels the weight of it. But the gardener also knows that the earth beneath the frozen ground is still alive. The spring will come, and the quiet work of tending does not pause. This is not a call to move on quickly, or to be strong, or to transcend your sorrow. It is something quieter and more honest than that. It is the recognition that you are still here. Your breath still moves. Your hands still work. Your feet still touch the ground. And there is a kind of dignity in that continuation. Not a triumphant dignity, a quiet one. The dignity of a life that persists, even when part of it has been taken away. Grief makes us want to leave. Not to die necessarily, but to step outside of time. Outside of the ordinary world, where things happen and people go about their days, and the sun rises and sets as though nothing has changed. We want to stay in the moment of loss, because leaving it feels like a betrayal. It feels like we are forgetting. It feels like we are saying that the person or the thing we loved did not matter as much as we thought. But this is a misunderstanding of what it means to live alongside grief. To continue is not to forget. To breathe is not to betray. To turn your attention to the present moment, to the simple, ordinary tasks of being alive, is not to diminish what you have lost. It is, in fact, to honor it. Because the person you loved would not want you to disappear. The love that you shared was not a love that demanded your absence. It was a love that wanted you to be here, present, alive. There is a gardener who has lost a section of her garden to frost. The damage is real. The loss is real. Some plants that were thriving are now blackened stems. And the gardener feels this. She walks through that part of the garden and her heart contracts. She remembers how those plants looked in full bloom. She remembers the work she put into them. She remembers the small pleasure of tending them each morning. But she does not stop going to the garden. She does not abandon the soil just because some of what grew there is gone. Instead, she notices what has survived. She sees the plants that are still green, still reaching. And she turns her attention to them. She waters them. She removes the dead growth so that the living plants have room to grow. She prepares the soil for what might come next. This is not a betrayal of what was lost. This is an act of care. This is a way of honoring the garden itself, the earth itself, the ongoing life of the place. And so the practice, when grief is heavy, is small. It is not grand. It is not about healing or moving forward, or any of the language that suggests you need to get somewhere other than where you are. The practice is this: choose one small task today. Something that your hands can do. Something that is an act of care for your own continuing life. It might be washing a cup slowly, feeling the warmth of the water. It might be making tea and actually tasting it. It might be sitting in a chair and feeling your body in the chair, feeling your feet on the floor. It might be walking to the mailbox and noticing the sky. It might be writing one sentence. It might be sitting with someone and listening to their voice. Do this one thing with your full attention, not as a way to distract yourself from grief, not as a way to prove that you are healing, but as a simple, quiet acknowledgement: I am still here. My life is still happening, and I can tend to it. I can be present to it, even now, even with this weight in my heart. This is the path continuing, not around the grief, but through it, one small act of presence at a time. When grief arrives, it often comes with a strange demand. We want to know how long it will stay. We want to understand the shape it will take, and when it will soften. We want a timeline, a map, some assurance that the weight will become lighter on a particular Tuesday in March. And when no such map appears, we sometimes feel we are doing something wrong, that our sorrow is too heavy, too stubborn, that we should have moved through it by now. But there is something the heart learns in grief that the mind cannot plan for. There is no schedule for how sorrow transforms. There is only the direct experience of it, moment by moment, and a slow discovery that something in us is learning to hold it differently. Not to fix it, not to make it disappear, but to let it exist without the added suffering of resistance. In the Zen tradition, there is a simple teaching that holds tremendous tenderness. Let the heart break open. What spills out is not only sorrow. This is not a call to positivity or to find the silver lining. It is an observation about what happens when we stop trying to keep the heart sealed against pain. When we release the grip, when we allow the breaking, something unexpected becomes visible. The sorrow is there, yes, but it is not alone. Think of ice on a stream in early spring. The ice is solid, dense, hard. It holds everything in place. But as warmth touches it, something shifts. The ice does not become less water. It does not disappear into nothing. It simply changes form. It melts. It becomes flow. The water that was locked in stillness now moves. And in that movement, something that was rigid becomes responsive to the landscape around it. The hardness becomes stream without ever leaving the water. The substance remains. The form transforms. Grief can work this way. We arrive at loss with a kind of hardness, a bracing against the reality of what is gone. This hardness is not wrong. It is a protection. It is the mind's way of saying, this is too much. I will hold myself together. But when we can allow the warmth of compassion for ourselves, for the person or thing we have lost, for the simple fact of impermanence that touches all life, something begins to shift. The ice does not vanish. The sorrow does not disappear. But it begins to move. It begins to flow through us rather than lodge inside us like a stone. This is what it means to hold sorrow with tenderness, not to overcome it, not to transcend it, but to stop fighting it so hard that we create a second layer of suffering on top of the first. The grief was already there. The loss already happened. What we add, often without knowing it, is the strain of resistance, the exhausting effort to keep the heart closed, the belief that if we just try hard enough, we can prevent ourselves from feeling what we are already feeling. When we release that effort, something unexpected becomes possible. Not happiness, not resolution, but a kind of spaciousness within the sorrow itself. Room to breathe, room to remember without being crushed by the remembering, room to feel the absence and, at the same time, to sense the presence of what the person or thing meant to us. These are not contradictions. They exist together, the way ice and water exist in the same substance. What spills out when the heart breaks open is not only sorrow. There is also tenderness. There is also love. There is also the recognition that we were capable of caring deeply enough to hurt this much. There is the quiet knowledge that we were changed by what we lost, and that this change, though it came through pain, is also a form of truth. We loved, we lost. We are still here, still capable of feeling, still alive in a world that includes both presence and absence. The mind wants to organize this. The mind wants to say, first I will grieve, then I will heal, then I will move on. But grief does not follow this sequence. It circles. It surprises us. It arrives in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. It also recedes. It also lightens. And we do not always know which is happening or when. We only know that something in us is learning to hold it differently. The heart is learning to stay open, even when it hurts. The body is learning to breathe even when the chest feels tight. The awareness is learning to witness the sorrow without drowning in it. This learning happens not through effort or willpower, but through a kind of patient presence, through allowing what is there to be there, through noticing that even in the deepest sorrow, there are moments of breath, moments of sensation, moments when the mind becomes still. These moments are not escapes from grief. They are places within grief where we can rest. If you wish to know what this feels like, you might sit in silence for 5 minutes. Not to solve anything or to make the grief go away, simply to be present with whatever arises. The sorrow may be there, the heaviness may be there, or there may be numbness or restlessness, or a strange mixture of feelings that do not have names. Let it all be there. Let the heart remain open, not because it is easy, but because it is true. And notice, without grasping, what else is present in the silence alongside the sorrow. The breath, the body, the simple fact of being alive right now. We come now to the end of these words, though grief itself may not be finished. And that is as it should be. The heart does not work on a schedule. Sorrow does not wait for permission, and it does not leave because we have understood something about it. What changes is how we meet it. You have been listening for some time now. Perhaps you are tired. Perhaps something in you has softened, or perhaps the ache is still sharp and present. Both are welcome here. There is no correct state to arrive at. Buddhism does not ask us to feel better by the end of the teaching. It asks us to feel clearly, to meet what is here without adding the suffering of resistance. Grief is not a problem to be solved. It is a wave that moves through the body, through memory, through the quiet moments when we expect to see someone and they are not there. The teaching does not erase this. It holds it. It says this too is part of the path. This too is where we practice. When the Buddha spoke of dukkha, he was not only speaking of physical pain or frustration. He was pointing to the tender, unavoidable truth that everything we love will change. Everything we hold will one day be released, whether we are ready or not. And in that release, there is sorrow. To be human is to know this sorrow. To practice is to stop pretending we can outrun it. What Buddhism offers is not comfort in the usual sense. It offers companionship. It says you are not broken for feeling this. You are awake. The heart that grieves is the heart that loved, and love is not a mistake. The path does not ask us to stop loving. It asks us to love without clinging, to let the heart remain open even when it aches. This is not easy. It is not meant to be easy, but it is possible. And it becomes possible not through great effort, but through small, repeated gestures of presence. Returning to the breath, noticing the body, letting the tears come when they come, letting the silence be silent. These are not grand spiritual achievements. They are the quiet work of being alive. You may find that the grief changes shape over time. What was once a sharp blade becomes a dull heaviness. What was constant becomes intermittent. Or perhaps it remains, but you learn to carry it differently. The teaching does not promise that the weight will disappear. It promises that you will grow strong enough to hold it without collapsing. And in that holding, something unexpected may arise, not joy necessarily, not relief, but a kind of steadiness, a sense that you can be with what is true, that you do not have to turn away from your own experience, that the breath continues, the body continues, and you are still here. If you wish to continue listening, there are other teachings waiting, but there is no urgency. You can return to silence. You can sit with what has been stirred. You can let these words fade and simply be with the room you are in, the air around you, the weight of your own body. Let the concepts fall away now. Let go of the ideas about grief, about Buddhism, about what you should or should not be feeling. Come back to the simplest thing, the breath moving in and out, the rise and fall of the chest, the coolness of the inhale, the warmth of the exhale. Notice the body where it touches the surface beneath you. Notice the hands wherever they are resting. Notice the jaw and let it soften if it will. Notice the belly and let it be as it is. There is nothing more to do right now. Nothing to understand. Nothing to fix. Just this breath. Just this moment. Just the quiet fact of being alive here, now, with whatever is present. The teaching is complete when we stop reaching for the teaching and simply rest in what is. Breathe in. Breathe out. Let yourself be held by the simplicity of this.